Hey, folks, we want to let you know that we're going to start reading emails from you, our listeners. And so if you want to email us and you want to tell us about what is exciting you about this podcast, things you're learning, stories of your own life that you're having conversations with people about masks, you can email us at TOTMPOD100. That's TOTMPod100 at gmail.com. We look forward to seeing your emails and we look forward to reading them here on the show. Thank you so much, folks.
It's the intimacy that we yearn. It's the love we misunderstand. And it's the sex that we settle for.
Ooh-wee.
And so be it porn, be it sex, I've really struggled with sex addiction for many years.
Yeah.
And yet for me, so much of it was around the shame, the body shame of not feeling attractive enough, not feeling valid enough, not feeling enough. And then that idea of no one would ever want me because of it.
Yeah.
And then from that place, then just going, well, what the fuck? Why am I even trying?
Ooh-wee.
And that's when I start to lose hope. That's when I start to lose, that's when I start going in my downward spirals, my shame spirals. And so it's the things that we don't talk about.
Yeah.
And the things that we take for granted that we just think, well, as men, it's often our terminal uniqueness.
Yeah.
That we think we're the only ones struggling with X. And so we're not going to bother or burden anyone else with this thing because it's so minuscule.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually so powerful in the ways that it can derail us.
Ooh-wee. Hello and welcome to the Taking Off the Mask podcast. My name is Ashanti Branch and I'm really glad you've joined us. Today's guest is Sean Harvey. Listen, this conversation is going to go deep fast and I hope you're ready for the ride. Sean and I get an opportunity to really talk about some really deep topics. One is around addiction and my early 8-year-old self finding myself finding this magazine that created a lot of challenges in my life. And as I was reflecting on this conversation, I realized that what I was hoping for in those days when I was like trying to figure out not to compare myself to these images I was seeing in these magazines, is I was really hoping for my father, like to that I had a father in my life to help me realize that that's not what I should be doing, that that's not the image of myself that I should be worrying about or stressing about or feeling not enough about. And then to hear Sean talk about his story with his father, and he'll tell his story about a time in his life where he felt not accepted by his father. And I imagine sometime in the confusion of what we would have hoped for in our life, maybe it wouldn't have been like we would have dreamed it would have been. Maybe my father would not have given me the right advice. I don't know. But oftentimes, looking back, we make up a story of that. If I had this and if I had that and if I had this, like my life would be so much better. And I wonder if that's always the case. You know, Sean in his work, he gets opportunity to work with men all over and having these real conversations, making space for men to talk out these topics that are so important for us to talk about. Normalizing what it means to not only occupy this body, but to be fully who I believe I am, to be my full authentic self. I think sometimes we miss having those opportunities in a world that tells us because we occupy this body that we should also be like everyone else who has previously occupied this body. That's part of the work that we get to do in these conversations. The Taking Off the Mask podcast is an opportunity for men of all ages and backgrounds to talk about these emotional masks we wear, one mask at a time. So if you haven't yet made a mask, you can do that at millionmask.org anonymously. You don't have to share it with anyone. Sean and I will share our mask here publicly, but you don't have to do that. You can do it anonymously. And maybe there's somebody in your life. Maybe there's somebody who you'd be willing to invite them to make a mask. We are really close to a big milestone in this movement. We are about really close to 100,000 masks. We're hoping to be there in about the next 60 days. So if you haven't yet made a mask, we invite you to be a part of the first 100,000 as we make our way towards 1 million masks around the world. Thank you for listening to the Taking Off the Mask podcast. I really hope that you will enjoy this conversation. I hope that it will enlighten you, inspire you, awaken you to the parts of yourself that you don't get to talk about. And maybe you will find somebody in your life to invite them to have a deeper conversation. If you know of anybody that we should reach out to, please let us know. Send us an email. You could send us an email, or you can make a comment. You can review it. However you feel you want to reach out to the work that we're doing in Ever Forward Club, we invite you to do that. But we want to thank you for being a part of this journey with us. We're so excited about where we're going next in this 2023, and we look forward to you being a part of the Million Mask movement. One last thing that I will say is we have a way for you to support the podcast. If you find that the words you're hearing here are inspiring to you, if you go down in the show notes at the very bottom, it'll say support this podcast. And you can just click the link there and it will take you to where you can support. You can support as a one-time support, or you can support monthly. I hope that what you are experiencing as you listen to these conversations of men of all ages from all over the world, that we're not alone. And hopefully these conversations will continue, and hopefully we'll get more people on the show that will inspire you. But every man we get to meet is another man who gets to realize that we're not alone. So thank you for being a part of this journey with us. Thank you for listening to the Taking Off the Mask podcast. And please enjoy today's episode with Sean Harvey. Bye now. Sean Harvey, I would like to welcome you to the Taking Off the Mask podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here and to reconnect after I think we are always sort of like ships passing across each other, near each other, in each other's orbits, and I have mad respect for everything you do.
Oh man, well I've been excited to learn more, and I've been, what I know coming into these shows, sometimes I know, like, if I met somebody before, pre-pandemic, I'm like, what happened in 2019? What
Right.
Where was I in 2019? I don't remember. I'm trying to remember 2019 as a whole, right? But knowing that we never could have expected what was going to happen just months later, right? Who could have thunk it, right, or thought about it, right? And so I'm so glad that you're here and we get to have this conversation. What I'd like you to do is, if you could introduce yourself to the audience and just let them know who you are, what you want them to know about you as we jump into these masks, and then we'll jump in after that.
Yeah, let's see. I'm a man who does men's work. I lead men's work. I'm a former Wall Street guy and a college professor who gave it all up. Went to work for a fashion company called Eileen Fisher. Was doing some amazing work in terms of personal growth and personal transformation with our employees. And they sent me to an artist commune in the middle of for 5 months in Canada to learn how to incorporate the arts into creative facilitation. And it's there that I got the call to work with men. But now you have to understand, I went to work for Eileen Fisher to never have to work with men again. And so to get this call, I knew, this is a spiritual calling, because I would not have chosen this. I think for many of us who do men's work and stay in men's work, many of us are called to men's work. We don't choose this life. And I knew when it was a spiritual calling that, I was told, the facilitator can only go as deep. The room can only go as deep as the facilitator is capable. And I knew that if we wanted to create real societal systems change, that I had to go and do my work with integrity. And that led me to seminary to focus exclusively on how to think about men's spiritual growth and soul healing for men if we want to create real systems change. And then 2 days before I graduated seminary, I get a call, and it's from a buddy of mine from Eileen Fisher saying it was the chief of police of Asheville. And this was 2 months after George Floyd. And he was doing a mea culpa in terms of some of the mistakes they made at a Black Lives Matter protest. And he said, we're reforming the department. And if you want to be part of police reform efforts in Asheville, email him directly. So I emailed him directly, and I said, look, I'm moving from Spanish Harlem, New York City to West Asheville, North Carolina. You know anything about that geography? And I said, my best friend who lives in London, he will visit me in New York, but he won't visit me in Asheville because he's afraid of being murdered by your police. And I just said to him, I said, I can't assure him of his safety, and so for that reason, I have to be part of this. That led to, because of my background, because of my credentials, my experience, it led to a one-on-one with the chief of police. And he said, Sean, and he had two asks. Can you help me deepen the compassion among my officers? And can you help me to create new types of conversations where the community members and officers can humanize each other and see each other differently? And with that, a new initiative was formed that I then started working with FBI agents and culture transformation experts, military folks, and we created something called Project Compassion, which is how do we deepen compassion in police departments across the country.
Yeah.
And then that led me to working with more folks in military. And then that led me to working directly with some white nationalists and having encounters and realizing when I talked to my spiritual guides as a spiritual leader that we have to play at the edges sometimes to be able to create real reform for everybody else. And so a lot of my work now is bringing the message of love, compassion, and humanity into white nationalists, far-right extremists, and militias to be able to create a new type of conversation, a new type of compassionate bridge building, and really being a covert operative, bringing spirituality into organizational systems.
Oh yeah, we going in. We going in, man.
There we go.
I really thank you. Thank you. I really the idea of compassion and being at the center. Like, what does that look like? And I'm thankful to hear that a police chief would be concerned about that. Sometimes we oftentimes are highlighted the stories of those who could care less, who act like they care less, who in their interviews after tragedy is like, "Hey, it's all your fault." Like I think it's important to have the voices of those who are standing up for a more a hard job, of course, but a compassionate work in a hard job, right? Like, yes. And so thank you. First of all, thank you for the work you're doing, and I'm excited for this conversation. I think definitely those are some pieces that I didn't know, right? And so I thank you for
Yeah.
being willing to share those. This idea of the mask, you and I are going to share our mask here publicly, but, we invite people all over the world to make their own mask. And so just for folks who have not made a mask yet, you can do that at millionmask.org on your own. And the front of the mask is the things that we gladly let the world see. The back of the mask, the things that we don't talk much about. And so you and I get a chance to share those first, but you as a guest get to decide who goes first. So either you want to go first or you want me to go first, and whatever you choose, it's the guest gets to decide.
All right. I like that. This is you know what? I'm gonna go first just because you do these all the time. So I talk about these, but it's always different when you ask someone else to do a mask versus when you do your own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I even after making lots of them, I'm always trying to be like really present in the moment, like what's happening right now, like what is.
Yeah.
And I think like I've been like wondering, oh, what am I going to do with all these hundreds of masks that are over here and I'm like, oh yeah, because I try and be real present to like the present feelings, right? Because what's
Mm.
real right now. So since you want to go first, you can start on the front, and then I can go front, or you can, or whatever method you feel you want to
Yeah,
roll with it. I'm ready when you are.
let's do front, and then back.
Okay, boom, I'm ready.
All right.
All right.
So let's see. How do I? Can you
Okay.
see that? Is that
Yeah, I can see
okay?
it. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm definitely not an artist, but I'm sure many people say that. So I think where I am today, it usually comes down to three things.
Yeah.
I have a vision, and
Mm,
so I'm able to really just share a kind of audacious vision for the possibility of a global movement of compassion and healing.
mm,
Um, I have a journey. I have a story that can be an inspiration to others and offer hope.
mm,
One of the things that I say is I never tell someone I'm going to meet. I never say I meet men where they are, because I
mm,
think there's something that's condescending in that I'm in a superior place. And what I do say is I know how much men are suffering in silence.
mm,
And so I often say, as a spiritual leader, as a man, as a friend, as a brother, that I meet men in their suffering.
mm,
I listen for their yearning,
mm.
and I offer hope in the midst of both.
Oh, we nice.
And then, I think the dance of my ego is my intelligence and the fact that I'm deeply intuitive and can connect the dots easily. So that's double edged. It's a gift, and it can also be my Achilles heel.
Mm,
But those are the three things that I often share with the world the most.
we thank you. Can you send me what you said about journey? Is the word journey there? Was the word
Yeah,
journey?
the word journey, and
Word,
then my journey is often an inspiration for others.
gotta see it. Okay.
Yeah,
Vision,
yeah.
journey, intelligence. Beautiful. I like the way you said that dance with the ego. Oh boy. That's a dance. That's a
Yeah.
dance. Um, I Yeah, I resonate with a lot of that, and I think I've been exploring new words to like use as I try and describe what things I'm really letting people see. I think vision is one that I would identify. I could actually add that as one, and I think the intelligence one is also one that when I talk about the reason I resonate with that is because let me just share my three, and then I'm gonna tell you why I
Yeah.
resonate with that. So this is what I
Yeah.
drew today.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
That's the That's, I don't know
Yeah.
what that was, but funny, serious, and caring.
Yeah.
Funny, serious, and caring. And when I think about the intelligent part, I think I've interesting because I actually in my work I feel that I'm somewhat intelligent, but I sometimes have that dance with the ego where I'm like I should not be letting people I should not be trying to pretend like I'm so smart. I
Mm.
should not be like pretending that I'm and and on the podcast, a couple like the one episode that just aired this week, a young man from Brazil, one of his friends that came up to him and told him, "Don't act like you're so special. Just and like don't think you're so special." And I felt charged for him. Like, how
Right.
dare your friend tell you that? Right? His friend was like, just you can just be your more authentic self. It's like why would you tell me that I shouldn't think I'm special in this
Right.
moment? And what he was trying to say was that what he was trying to say about his friend was that his friend was saying, "Look, you don't have to try and be special.
Mm.
You already are special.
Mm.
Like if you just be yourself, then you will feel more free.
Yeah.
But when you're in the hunt for it, and I think that part when I think about when growing up in my community, trying to pretend like I was smart, always was like, who you think you are?
Yeah.
Who you think you better than us? You think you XYZ? Like it almost felt like you had to like hide out
Yeah.
because being too smart was not seen as a positive at the school I went to. Now, because I hung around with some of the nerds, like I had a dance, right? I'll go to football practice, and then after practice, I'm going to a study hall, right, or something, right?
Yeah.
Or before practice, I went to a study hall because I come to practice late, and people are mad why I'm late. But I'm like, hey, sorry, I, you know what I'm saying? Like, and having this battle between like trying to be cool in the best word I could use, and trying to also have a vision that I'm getting out of this town as soon as I graduate, right? Like
Right.
I'm going to college.
Right.
I'm not getting stuck here, but also needing to still dance with the part of myself that wants to be cool and wants to be liked and wants to
Yeah.
be important and wants to feel important. And so anyway, funny, serious, and caring are the ones that came up today. Like I've yeah, yeah, the one that's sticking out to me right now is serious. Like funny and caring. As much as I like to laugh, I find myself
Mm.
getting into like serious mode, work mode, so
Right.
like intensely sometimes that the funny and caring is hard to show up. It
Right.
it yeah. So anyway, that's the front.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm a little jealous that you get to do this every time you do one of these podcasts. You get to create a new mask and play off the other person and have another idea and another insight.
Thank you. Well, you gave me a new
Yeah.
word to play with here. It's gonna
Yeah.
be a dance for sure.
Yeah. Hmm.
But
So,
but I really like the way you said. I mean, before you get into the back, I really like what you said. I know how much men are suffering in silence.
yeah.
Like I resonate with that so much, and I resonate with that for our young men in my community. Like I know how much, and I know how I know is not because it's because I'm that man.
Yeah.
I've been that boy. I'm
Exactly. Yeah.
not because I've read a bunch of books. I mean, and I have not because I've watched a lot of talks, and I have, but because I have felt it. What it was like to just like walk around, like, "Hey, how you doing?" And
Yeah.
behind that smile was man. So I really appreciate you saying that. I like that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're feeling we're just going to keep bouncing off each other. Um, so something you just said is you were talking about your different communities,
Mhm.
and like where you fit and where you hid, in
Yeah.
a sense, or I think for me, before I get into my back, that my professional life and my personal life have been very separate up until recently. And my presence and the way that I am and my gay side have been very disconnected.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to share the back of my mask, which is the cost of that disconnection.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you.
So these are it took four because one of them really showed up later.
Yeah.
So the first is addiction. The second is my HIV status, um, coupled with internalized homophobia. And then third is deep loneliness because of a feeling of never being invited and never being welcomed in community. But as a gay man, the fourth, a sense of body shame around not having the archetype of the gay body
Mhm.
that has always left me in being in the dark and in the shadows. So my personal life was always in the shadows, and my professional life was always out in the public eye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, there's a couple of that are resonating, but I really appreciate you sharing that. And body shame was wow. And I remember I told you I left one blank on the back. I left a blank. When I told you I left a blank, so I'm gonna I'm gonna share the back right here, and then I'm gonna tell you what's resonating really heavily right
Yeah.
now. So, and it's connected to the why there's one blank. So the back,
Mm.
fear and worry, and I think the third one that I didn't write until right now is body shame.
Mm.
Wow, wow, oh my God, I feel it's coming right here.
Yeah.
Okay,
Here we go.
okay.
Yes.
So it started when I was like 7. maybe 8. And so I've always been a big kid. And I remember like they back then they used to call you husky. That's why they
Right.
protect you from calling you fat. Like they would call you husky, but it was just I mean, I knew what they were saying, right? Right? You go to the store, they're like, what kind of pants he needs? Oh, he needs huskies, right?
Right.
Like, we're not gonna give you the pants for fat little boys. We're gonna give you the pants for husky boys, right? Because it
Right.
was a way for them to make it. But deep down, like in the soul, like I knew, right? And I think as I got to 8 and I began to uh, like ignore what was happening inside of my body and heart wise, like I was ignoring some trauma, I started eating a lot. And I
Yeah.
remember like just eating like a lot of junk, more junk stuff. Anything junk I could get my hands on, the better, right? I was like I was always hoarding food.
Yeah.
Um, and I think also around that time was when I began an addiction to like pornography, and it was a
Yeah.
harder addiction back then because it was just I had this one magazine that I had found in some empty lot somewhere in Oakland, and literally that one magazine is the beginning. I'll never forget the first time I saw it.
Right.
I'll I'll never forget how much work I had to do to keep it hidden because my mom, she was nosy and she was always in my business. So I was like, I had to strategize all the time, like keep it hidden behind, like not just behind stuff, behind, under, through. Like I had to like be. I mean, it was ridiculous the amount of
Yeah.
energy I had to try and do to keep that thing hidden. But it was an addiction that at the time I didn't know it was an addiction. I know now what it was happening, what it was doing, and it often and it's what started me being able to see my body as a 8-year-old little boy and be like
Yeah.
I'm not enough, right? Like I'm fat, I'm a husky. I am looking at these images of bodies that are made for magazines that are
Right.
definitely, and how am I ever going to compare to this, right? Like why am I even comparing myself to this? But there's no man in my house helping me realize that whatever images I'm seeing out in the world are I'm not supposed to be comparing myself to. So I constantly like starting really
Yeah.
young.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have to wait for middle school or for high school to like start thinking I wasn't enough. It started so early. And so like no matter how much people would give me compliments, it wouldn't stick because in my mind, I had already programmed this idea that you're not enough.
Right.
You're not enough. And so I think that is uh thank you for sharing that word. I've actually never written that on the back of my mask. And I'm glad I did. And I think even today, as I've been on a binge of flour and sugar, which is my favorite treats in the world.
Right.
And I've been like putting on weight, and watching it grow, and getting a new belt, and I'm like, what are you doing? But when I'm
Yeah.
running from feelings, is when I go to the addictions, when I go to
Yeah.
eating, and everyone got to eat, right? So it's easy to hide the fact that I'm not having a healthy relationship with a package of
Right.
cookies, right? Because it's easy to be
Yeah.
like, I bought them, they're mine, I can do what I want with them, right?
Yeah.
And I'm at home by myself when I'm eating them in a very
Right.
unhealthy way, So
Mm.
yeah, ooh wee, that
Yeah.
that came quick. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah, the body shaming piece is huge. It's something we don't talk enough about. And I don't think I don't think there's a lot of pathways in for guys to talk about or even know you can talk about
Yeah, yeah,
And I noticed when I was living in DC, I was pretty miserable and pretty depressed. And I think one of the things that's interesting about when we're doing men's work is we're labeling, we're diagnosing, we're saying, here's the problem. Yeah, my sense is most guys, when they're in depression, don't have any clue they're in depression. And so those words don't even resonate or land as to seeing how it fits to where they are.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it's the suffering in silence, because it's these things. And for me, when I notice that I'm going above a certain weight, I know I can pretty much say, all right, what's going on? What am I avoiding? What am I? And for me, it happened the same age, around 7 years old,
Yeah.
when I started gaining the weight. And it was right after my parents' divorce. And there's a lot of other stuff in the mix with that, but um, it for me, the core message, the core wounding tape is nobody would ever want me.
Yeah.
And I
Mm.
I've learned, I've come to, I think for each of us, it's figuring out what is our own personal mantra
Yeah.
that we tell ourselves that is our, that is going to take us into our spiral, our shame spirals.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think, we talk, I mean, you're talking to teenage boys and adults. I'm talking to a lot of adults, and I'm often doing the work around helping us untether love, sex, and intimacy.
Mm.
And what I often say is um, it's the intimacy that we yearn, it's the love we misunderstand, and it's the sex that we settle for.
Ooh-wee.
And
Ooh.
so, be it porn, be it sex, I've really struggled with sex addiction for many years.
Yeah.
And yet, for me, so much of it was around the shame, the body shame of not feeling attractive enough, not feeling valid enough, not feeling enough. And then that idea of no one would ever want me because of it.
Yeah.
And then from that place, then just going, well, what the fuck? Why am I even trying?
Ooh-wee.
And that's when I start to lose hope. That's when I start to lose, that's when I start going in my downward spirals, my shame spirals. And so it's the things that we don't talk about,
Yeah.
and the things that we take for granted, that we just think, well, it's our, as men, it's often our terminal uniqueness,
Yeah.
that we think we're the only one struggling with X, and so we're not going to bother or burden anyone else with this thing because it's so minuscule.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually so powerful in the ways that it can derail us.
Ooh-wee. Can you repeat that the way you phrased it around? You said intimacy that we desire,
Yeah. So it's the intimacy that we yearn for.
yearn for.
It's and most of us can't articulate it, but that's
Mm.
what we're really seeking,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's the love we misunderstand,
Yeah.
because no one really taught us how to love,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we have many of us have an intellectualized idea of love,
Yeah.
but we
Yeah.
don't have the felt sense of unconditional love, love without conditions.
That's it. That's it.
And then and then the sex that we settle for, how we take it. One time, a friend of mine said, you know, when we use sex as our coping mechanism,
Yeah.
it's like eating a bag of glazed potato chips. You can never have just one, and there's no nutritional value.
So, man, oh man. Hey, folks, I am reaching out to you right now to let you know that we are inviting all of our listeners to become supporters of this podcast. If you find these conversations valuable and meaningful, as we march towards 1 million masks, we know that it's more than just these conversations we need to have. It's more conversations in schools and in communities. And we're going to ask you to help that mission along. We're going to ask you to be a supporter. If you go to the bottom of the show notes, there'll be a link that says support this podcast. And we invite you to be a supporter. Figure out what area makes the most sense for you to support. And we look forward to you being a part of this movement as we make masks with people all over the world. But in these conversations, as we have conversation with men about their masks, from youth all the way to our elders in our community. So thank you for being a part of the podcast, and we'll see you soon. The reason that statement really rung out to me, and I thank you for that piece, because I was with a group of middle schoolers last week, and we were beginning to read this book, "Boys Will Be Human," um, by Justin Baldoni, and in chapter 6 he talks about dopamine. So these young men, every time I go, like when they come to our circle, it's all young men. All of the more mature boys, meaning they have had their growth spurts, and the ones who are taller, and the athletic ones. Every time we get ready to come into our circle, almost always, I would say, if not 90%, they're always in front of the room with their friends, which are usually these girls, right? And the boys who have not hit their growth spurt, they're always just kind of like watching this happen. They're like
Right.
watching this one boy with two girls around him, and this other boy over here with three girls around him, and the girls are like, "Oh, you're going into the boys' space," right? And you just see this like interaction happening. And so we they are always like in subliminal and like very under and very unhealthy ways talking about girls
Right.
as they get ready to come into the room. Because when I finally say, "Okay, let's get ready to come on in," then the girls got to leave. They got to give their little hug, and then the younger boys are like you just watch them. You just watch their eyes. You watch their body language. So we start talking about dopamine in terms of where dopamine comes from, and we talk about this idea of things you desire.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting that these definitely the boys who are hit this growth spurt already. I watched them operate like in a place of fear
Yeah.
as we started even mentioning the word sex, right?
Yeah.
Now, what was happening is they're talking about it amongst each other, but in totally unhealthy ways.
Right.
And yet, when we come to a space to really try and have a conversation, like it almost paralyzes them.
Yeah.
And I almost felt like this idea that, and the reason I guess you guys came to that story was because this idea of when it starts and where do we get to go and talk about it? Where do we get to go and feel like somebody can listen to us or hear us? And this love, intimacy, and sex, because they're all thinking they're having sex or they're all talking
Right.
about it really, but they have a hard time just being able to just be themselves in a space where we're honoring you for just
Right.
being you, where you don't have to
Right.
prove anything to us in this circle. You don't have to be anybody special in this circle. And I think that part is where I find when I watched it happen, it literally happened a week ago. So I've been really just like taking it in, like
Yeah.
what happened? Like why did that boy have the most verbal discomfort with, we read 3 paragraphs in this book it was the lightest 3 paragraphs of the whole book. And he was freaking out. And I'm like, weren't you just in front of the room? Like
Right.
acting this way, and now we're having a healthy conversation about it. And I realized that, like, and he wrote in his little reflection, like, I'm uncomfortable talking about it. I rather talk about it with kids and not with adults,
Yeah.
right? And so because I can be the expert in this room of like bunch of 12 and 13-year-old boys, like no one can question me on what I think I know. No one can
Right.
question. And so anyway, we're gonna unpack some of that this week, and but that idea is like, where do our young men and boys get a chance to find, even whether it's not sex, whether it's the extremism stuff you're talking about, like who do I get to talk about it with? If everyone around
Right.
me is talking about these things in this way, do I have a place of talking about it in a way that I don't agree?
So I'm going to take us where I wanted to take us, and you just gave me an opening. Um, when I because so I do this thing in Philadelphia called Men's Soul Adventures Philly,
Mm,
and so a soul adventure is really where outdoor adventure meets deeper male bonding meets soul connecting conversations.
nice.
And so right before I started my soul adventures back in DC, I was doing intimacy labs, I was doing relationship labs, I was doing these things, and you know what? No one showed up because we don't want to go head on as men into the real conversation. But the moment I took a bunch of guys out hiking and just said, "Hey, new beginnings," all they want to do is talk about just got divorced out of a divorce,
Mm,
breaking up with my girlfriend, and then they wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I call it, we have to just like hit it on the side, never hit it direct on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but the thing that, so I've been around men's work for a while now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. If you have a different perspective, I'd love to hear it. But one of the things I think that's missing, a missing ingredient in so much of men's work, is explicit spiritual connecting conversations.
Mm,
And so, what I mean by that is, I'm an interfaith minister. I'm not a Christian minister, but I do speak the teachings of Christ. Um, but really, my message is about love,
yeah.
at its core. And how do we raise our love vibration to be able to counter out and counteract the hate and the fear and the disconnection,
Yeah.
right? So, in doing that, what I found is we don't have places that are accessible, like practical spirituality for dudes,
Yeah.
where it's just like, and when I talk about spirituality, a lot of guys, from the atheist to the evangelical,
Yeah.
to the Hindu, to the Buddhist, to the Christian, to the Jewish guy, to the Muslim, to the shaman, want to talk about spirituality, because I don't think we talk enough about sex or spirituality.
Mm, mm,
Or it's so woo woo that it's like it's not accessible to a lot of guys
yeah.
and they can't see themselves in it. Or it's so restrictive, like by organized religion and so many recovering this and that,
Yeah.
that they can't even look at it. And I think where a lot of men are, and are in a place of spiritual crisis,
Yeah.
which is, no matter where you are on the spectrum, spiritual spectrum, religious spectrum, of how do you strengthen your own spiritual core,
Mm,
and how do you go into the wisdom that's within you, that is your soul, and how do you start to tap into your sacred compass that can help you navigate a world that's increasingly complex, increasingly evolving, and where you don't necessarily see that you have a place in it, and you can't see your own relevance as a man. How tapping into the truth of your own core
yeah.
can be a way of guiding you into a place of a harmony with the world, and finding your own calmness and inner calm, so you can live from a place of peace.
And and I see so many of them need that.
Yeah.
So many of them need that. I am, man. And how do you? I think how do you do that? I mean, maybe it's a question, but also a thought. Like I have one young man who has been struggling. Like he lost his mom right after 8th grade, lost his grandma right after 12th grade. Now all guardians are gone. Right now he's
Yeah.
trying to figure out, how do I navigate the world with the two adult people
Yeah.
who were there no longer there, and how do I? And I've been, I would invite him to church. I go to church on Sundays. I would invite him, and he's like, "Oh, I don't believe in that." And I said, "Well, I'm not asking you to come and make a belief. Would you be willing to just come, right?" And no pressure. Okay, all right. And the other day he was like having a moment, right? And I said, "Brother, I don't know what else to tell you. Like there's, like when I am hitting a wall, I have a place that I can go, and it doesn't
Yeah.
give me an immediate answer, but I feel some kind of assurance that even when I'm talking about only my men's circle, which I have a place to go, I have this presence by myself alone that I can just tap in. And I said, I think you're missing a connection to something bigger, because
Right.
and I think, and he's like, are you? This is what he said to me. He said, "Are you telling me I have to go to therapy?" I said, I don't know where that word came from. That didn't come out of my mouth.
Right.
I
Right.
said, I'm not telling you have to do anything. I'm inviting you to like understand that you're feeling disconnected,
Right.
and you're not even exploring what am I disconnected from,
Right.
right? What am I disconnected from? And I right, not that I can even understand what he's feeling about having the loss of mom and grandma. Like
Right.
I don't claim to know that. I just claim to say, brother, but but they're there's a ways through this. You're going through something
right.
right now. And so I like that when you said that, like, how do we help men in general? Just what are you connected to? What is the source?
What's yeah, I think I what I find is when I look at men's work from a place of, because a lot of people now share ideas with me like, hey, I want to create this men's circle, I want to do this thing, and I'm like, okay, cool. And how are you going to keep these guys in with all their competing priorities?
Yeah,
Life happens
yeah,
to keep them engaged and want to keep coming back.
yeah, yeah,
And so that's when I started saying, you know what, I think if you blend it with, outdoor adventure,
yeah,
hikes and kayaking and whitewater rafting and
yeah,
rock climbing and rappelling and these sorts of things, that attraction, and
yeah,
if you're always keeping it, you're tapping into a guy's adventurous spirit.
yeah, yeah.
And the way that I say it is, my second master's was in existential psychotherapy.
Mm,
And so I really just ask the existential questions, and I break it down into four questions that I'm always asking guys. I frame it around the questions of who am I?
mm-hmm,
Why am I here? What am I here to do?
mm,
And my favorite, how do I love?
away.
Authenticity, connection, and purpose.
Yeah,
And those, I think, are really the core tenets for any guy.
yeah,
The way we get there
yeah,
is how do we create experiences that are going to engage, that aren't going to be threatening, aren't going to be intrusive, aren't going to be invasive,
yeah,
and aren't, I remember I was on a talk once and someone right before me said to young men, we have to show young men the way. And I came up right after him and I said, we need to ask, we have to ask men and young men the questions so they can discover their own truth and be in a space of inquiry.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think we're at a place anymore. I think men's work in general is at this place of a reckoning.
Mm,
I think one most many of these men's work ideas were created in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That was a very different time.
yeah,
Now, as we break down the constructs around gender and sexuality and power dynamics and look at the complexities of race and injustice and oppression in our society,
yeah,
what role does men's work have to play in that? And how do we as men have to do our own reconciliation with ourselves?
yeah,
Not even just say, I'm going to fix this, but what's my relationship to this?
yeah,
And how do I make sense of this? And what are my fears that I can't talk about? So I think sometimes it's less about a coaching model of let's do your well-being,
mm,
which I think sometimes can be a bit narcissistic because it's like, all right, but what's your anchor and how you're discerning?
yeah,
But second, how are you making sense of the world and how are you staying uplifted in it versus how are you avoiding not being dragged down by it?
yeah. Who we and the drag comes from so many places. I think the drag
Right,
down, right? The drag down. There's so many ways that I think I see in society that there are ways to drag down, and there's so almost few places that feel like uplifting, right? I think that
right,
I mean it's clear when you're not being enough. Like you can just look at that magazine, look at that superstar, look at that athlete, look at that
right,
musician, and be like, oh, I can't do that. I can't like see. There's a lot of ways of, especially in our social media comparison world, right?
right,
Like, oh, that thing got 8 million likes. How?
right,
He just stood on the top of whatever, right? And then we like look at our 2 likes and we're like, or zero or 10, right? And we're
right,
like, oh, and I think the idea of comparison gets into that in so many ways. And that's for the young men in the context that I'm talking about, like, man,
yeah,
how do you help them realize that I need to like, I can't like hope society's gonna like bring it to me. I may have to go and seek it,
right,
right? Because if you're not careful, you could constantly be in a dopamine hunt for trying to get that thing that's going to make you feel
right.
good and feel important and feel valuable, as opposed to just saying, yeah, I am important, I am valuable.
Yeah.
and to find people who around me who can see more of that in me.
You know, as you're talking, as I think about young men, I also think about you can only see what you can see. So you see the world from your experience, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so we as older men know that you're going to go through an evolution of many experiences
yeah,
and heartbreaks and heartaches that are going to help you grow, right?
yeah,
And so one of the things that I talk about in my book is surrendering into the unknown.
yeah.
Something
Mm,
for so many guys that's hard to do, which is to release control and surrender into the mystery.
yeah,
And that's often where the magic happens in life. And I think it takes a number of different times of either hitting the wall or getting beat down to be able to get to that place of like, okay, if I finally surrender.
yeah,
So
yeah,
telling a teenager, hey, you got to surrender when they think they've got a handle on the world. And so I think it's, one of the things, and maybe it's up for me as maybe a little more as a gay man, that in the gay community we don't have a lot of elders,
mm,
because the elders were wiped out and died, and from many from the AIDS epidemic. And so a whole generation was lost, especially in urban environments. And so there's not the models, there's not the elders. And I think one of the things that I would love to see more of is the mentorship among across the generations, both
yeah,
mentoring to younger people and then the reverse mentoring up,
yeah,
so that we can create a different type of relationship around what does it mean to be a man. Because I think it's the experience of having gone through and hitting our heads so many times, and the wisdom that comes from the lessons learned, and then young folks being able to show us new ways of seeing things, and also for a lot of us who lose hope as we get older, to have that vibrancy and that hope and that optimism to like bring us into a place of recalibrating our even just our energy,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and the curiosity on both sides, of like what. And I think right now, in a world that seems so complex, I would say it's less about us trying to figure out the answers and more of us asking the questions, what if and what's possible.
mm. What if? Yeah, what's possible? The group of men who I'm going to meet tomorrow, I think we're always posing these questions to them to reflect on, and I think that is going to be an interesting one. I think I'm going to, I really think, I'm always trying to like invite them to think outside of the normal boxes that they feel themselves stuck in, And so I think for a lot of our young men who are wherever in their development they are in this processing of like who I am in the world and what things about myself can I talk about, what things can I not talk about,
Yeah,
what things am I pondering that no one here could possibly understand. And I often hear young men say that like nobody in here would ever understand what I'm going through. This is what they write in their anonymous, usually
well,
reflections. No one in here could ever know what I'm going through. No one in here could ever understand what I'm feeling. No one in here
well,
could ever. And I think that part is like, what if they could?
yeah,
Like, what possibilities would it be for you if people can not only hear you but see you and understand you? What would that feel like? What possibilities for your life would be around if you trusted that was the case, that you had a space to go and not have to try and mask it? I think
yeah,
that's what we try and create for those young people, and I think that's the work. I mean, it's an addition to the work that we continue to do. Like if we can't catch them when they're young, then we got to get them when they're older, and hopefully they're willing to be listening to a new paradigm of how they've seen it playing out their whole life.
yeah.
Do you see it easier for when you work with older men to have these conversations, or with younger men? Do you see a difference?
No, No, I mean, I work with 20 somethings. I work with 50, 60 somethings. Um, Again, it's not intellectualizing this, and it's not labeling or diagnosing. It's not saying you're in your hyper masculine right now and this is what it looks like.
Mm,
I think what it is really us just sitting with and saying, all right, let's just talk about what's going on in your life.
yeah, yeah.
And let's listen for where you're suffering. And let's help you
Mm,
make sense of it. And I think we don't need is we don't I'm gonna get in trouble here. We don't need so many coaches who are coaching and advising people. We need people to actually just sit with each other and just be and hold and witness and love.
yeah.
I was just thinking about the mask exercise, and I'm like, if love were to have a mask, how
Mm,
would love, what would be on the front and what would it be on the back?
yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
what would love show, and what would be a mystery behind the mask of love that people don't understand?
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a young, I mean, I'm glad you asked that question because a young man the other day was talking about that same topic. Like, had a really bad breakup, with one partner, and then went into the next relationship wanting to love fully, but the mask of love had all these walls up of like
Mm-hmm.
protect my heart, protect
Mm-hmm.
myself, protect my emotions, don't give too much.
Right.
Don't let your heart get broke. You know what that feels like. Don't do it.
Right.
Don't trust. And I think that that's almost what it does. It's like it takes the lessons and it starts callousing up pieces, right? It's like I think that I mean it's not working with a lot of teenagers. They have that first girlfriend and they have that first breakup and they think the world is over. And you're like, and you see them come out of that into a lot of different ways. You see them come out
Right.
of it in ways where they're like, I'm never gonna let anybody,
Right.
right? And some are like, I need some rebound, right? I need a rebound, right?
Right.
And you've
Right.
watched them operate in so many different ways of how they have now defined what that
Right.
emptiness and that feels like, that the beautiful feeling, and then the other
Right.
side of that, right? Because the reason love is so powerful is that if you ever had the other side of it, you know that there's something else out there, right?
Right.
And I think that's a really beautiful place too. So
Well, I wanna add to it. I want to add another layer to it,
yeah,
which I think is so important because it's clear you love the kids that you serve and you help grow and you help develop.
yeah,
I love the men who I support. Right. I think there's something about when we do this work, if we're coming from the head and it's intellectualized, versus it's something very different when you feel that another man loves you unconditionally, sees you, and comes from a place of an open, compassionate heart.
mm,
When people ask me how I do what I do, I had to do my work to be able to say I can love someone whose views I don't agree with,
yeah,
and I see them in their humanity. I love them in their humanity.
yeah,
I see their views, and I also understand the suffering behind their views. And I want to sit with them in the suffering of those views because I know that by bringing the love to that suffering, that can create the paradigm shifts, the heart shifts, and the soul shifts.
mm, mm.
And then, but
Ooh,
I think what we do when we operate from this place of love, when a man platonically loves another man,
mm,
supports another man,
yeah,
we're offering care and nurturing to another man, and we're holding them in that.
yeah,
That's when magic happens. That's when it will defy any analytical study. It will defy any logic that we're not going to be able to provide proof of concept.
yeah, yeah.
But there's a magic that's happening energetically that is transforming hearts.
And maybe just something that's just coming to my mind right now. How do you talk to men about, or how do you talk to men about loving someone that hates you, that whether it's a partner that has now it was a rough breakup, and now
Right.
you still maybe, I mean, there's so many different scenarios, right? But how do you
Right.
love someone who actually you feel, I mean, and love doesn't have to be a verb. It can be just a feeling, right?
Right.
Like I have love for that person. I don't need to have any deep, intimate connection, but I don't have to hate them because they hate me, right? How do we like
Right.
not always go to eye for eye, right?
Yeah. I think that's the $1,000,000 question,
Yeah.
right? But I have an answer. It's not the answer, but it's an answer. I have some thoughts around it,
Mm,
which is when we do our own work and we learn to love ourselves and we figure out that roadmap of how do you love yourself, right? And you then just start to permeate love in your, because it then becomes your view.
yeah.
And so when you see someone who does not like you or hates you,
Yeah.
you can still hold them from a place of love. And you don't need you've moved beyond people pleasing. You've moved beyond attachment wounds. You've learned, you moved beyond not getting what you needed from your mom or your dad.
Yeah.
And you were just like, I am strong in my core.
Yeah.
I have people who love me because I'm able to love them. I'm experiencing love in a different way. And when I see this person, I don't have sympathy for them. I have compassion for them. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
And I have compassion that every person that's born is wounded. And so when I can see their humanity,
Yeah.
so if an ex did me wrong, I see, all right, well, that's where they are in their journey right now. And I'm in acceptance that, and I have a hope that they are able and have capacity and will hopefully have opportunity to do their work.
Mm,
You
yeah.
know, when my father, when I told him I was gay at 27, so I told my mom when I was 15, but my dad was a trucker and I was supposed to be a third generation trucker and that didn't happen. But uh, when he found out I was gay, he's Jehovah's Witness and he didn't talk to me for 14 years.
Mm,
And I ended up getting a phone call that he was in his last year of his life and he was dying. And there was a moment where we reconnected and he shook my hand. He couldn't give me a hug and he talked incessantly for 5 hours because he was afraid of asking me any questions.
mm,
He was too afraid to know who I was. So my ex-boyfriend was with me and of course I went to dinner and bitched about the whole thing because I was like, what the I'm human. Next day we saw him again. We got a little better. Um, but then a few days later he called me and he said, "Son, I'm not judging you, but I can't condone your life choice, and you're going to hell."
mm,
Well, the door had been opened, and so my dad started calling me randomly,
yeah.
and I at first I didn't take his calls, right, and then I'd take his calls, but I was like totally distant, and disconnected. I was like, why am I wasting my time? Like, you abandoned me, right? You have to understand, my dad was a long haul trucker for 43 years, Vietnam vet. And he also in that call told me how much he hated Hillary Clinton. He was voting for Ben Carson. So politically, we're on a different page too. Um, and and then there was a certain point when I said, "Okay, Sean, you have two choices right now. You can either stay in resentment or you can
Mm,
lean into love. This is your choice. Which one are you going to choose?"
yeah.
And so I chose to lean into love.
Yeah.
So then I started taking his calls. It was still distant. I mean, we still had some work to do.
Yeah.
You know, and then there was one time when he started talking politics, and I just kept throwing facts back at his assertions. And at a certain point, he started laughing, and I said, "Wait a minute, no one ever calls you out on your bullshit, do they?" And he just laughed and said, "No." I said, "You do know I'm your son, right? See, here's how this works. I'm a better version of you, so whatever you throw at me, I'm going to throw back harder than you, and I'm going to win." And, and it was the moment that he was like, "Oh yeah, you're my kid." Like everything else like went away, and that was the door opener. A few calls later, I said, "You know what? I want to take you back to that time when you said that you didn't condone my life choice and I was going to hell.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to break down for you all the ways that it had an impact on me." I went boom, boom, boom. And finally he's like, "You know what? I didn't realize I had that impact on you. I'm sorry."
Wow.
There was a certain point, though, when I realized that he did the best that he could. Two, that he was living his karma right now. And that three, I didn't need to hold on to anything more, and I could totally forgive him. And by the time that I got the phone call that he was going into hospice, I drove out to Detroit to go see him. And I had to be snuck in because his wife wasn't going to let the gay kid come in, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Snuck in. I was with my dad for 10 hours.
Wow.
But this time around, I asked him, like, what advice would you give your only child, your only son? And he said, "Son, don't let anybody get your powder wet." I'm like, "My powder?" He's like, "Your gunpowder, son, your gunpowder." He said, "Don't let anybody extinguish your flame. Don't let anybody diminish who you are or what you are. Be proud of, and I want you to be proud of who you are and what you are, because I'm proud of the man you become."
Oui.
So, over the course of the year, seeing that transformation because I chose love and he chose love. And that's when I really saw the transforming power of love. And so when I walk into militias or I walk into communities of fear and hate, when I walk into police departments, when I talk to FBI agents or military guys or Marines, I see these guys in their humanity. I see them in their. I don't see them in their badge. I don't see them in their uniform. I don't see them. I acknowledge where they might be in terms of their fear, their disconnection, their hate, or their ideas.
Yeah.
But I also see the boys that they were, the constricted boys that they had become, constricted men they became, and I honor them because they're in their journey. And this just happens to be I'm meeting them at this point in the journey, but this isn't the total story of their journey in their life. And, I in my book, one of the chapters I have is called, I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong. I call it the trifecta of constriction for men. So 3 things: healing the wounded masculine, sexism, and internalized homophobia. And what I say is what every boy, gay or straight or anywhere on the continuum, will grapple with from a young age. Am I man enough? Am I acting like a girl? Am I a fag? And I was on a podcast I was on a different podcast, and I said that, and the announcer said, "Did you say am I fat?" I said, "No." I said, "Am I a fag?" She said, "Oh, you mean are you gay?" And I said, No. I said, "Am I a fag?" She said, "Are you gay?" And she said, "Oh, you mean are you gay?" And I said, "No." I'm like, first of all, let's stop watering down this language. I said the intensity of that word, the severity of that word, is equivalent to the level of shame that each boy will experience that will constrict them for the rest of their lives. And so when we can get to and see the ways that other men are constricted based on their conditioning, based on the messages they've received,
Mm,
based on the hate that's been instilled in them that is not them.
yeah. Yeah.
And we can have compassion for them and their journey and having and just acknowledging and accepting that this is where they are now.
Yeah.
And when I do the work, it's never me converting. It's never me saying you're wrong. It's never me saying I don't agree with your beliefs. What I do is I come back in and say, but let's talk about love, compassion, and humanity. And ultimately, the more we expand the heart and the more we expand our capacity to love, and for many men, for men to learn how to love,
Ooh, the capacity.
that's when transformation can happen.
That's right. And I think back to what you said, and it takes compassion. It takes
Yeah.
compassion from all of us, for all of us, to all of us, right? Man, Sean, this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Um, what I would like to do, I think, as I've talked to men, I've been saying like, like I feel like we've had a really meaningful conversation, and I want more men to know that these are possible, right? Like
Yeah.
that these are possible with people that you think you know and people that you may not think you want to know, right?
Yeah.
That we could just get together and have a conversation and learn like about each other, right? Learn together. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank
Um,
you.
I would like you, if you could, just as we close up, just if you could just let folks know how, if people want to come. I don't know if you still do the adventure, or you told me I wrote the name of it. You call it the
Men's Soul Adventures.
Soul Adventure. Yeah. If you
Yeah.
still do those, I don't know what other things people can get involved in that you do, or hear more from you of your work. Will you tell folks how they can
Yeah.
follow you, get in touch with you, or whatever ways that makes sense for you?
Yeah. I think the easiest way is just go to my website, which is warriorcompassion.com. So the book is going to come out in September. It's Warrior Compassion: Unleashing the Healing Power of Men.
Nice.
And it's really a roadmap for soul healing, and to really open our hearts to its capacity of compassion, and to help us learn to love. And really, the way I say it is, one, helping us discover the truth of who we are. Two, more important, learning to love the truth of who we are.
Mm,
Third, unearthing our inherent gifts. And fourth, realizing the ways we're truly meant to contribute in the world.
beautiful. Well, I feel the compassion. I feel the connection, and I appreciate you for these for this time that you dedicated
Yeah.
to this conversation. And I'm looking forward. We'll put a link to all of that in the show notes, so the people in there, as they can reach out to you in that way. And I think it's just a beginning. This is not bye. This is not.
Right.
This is like looking forward to seeing you again, and looking forward to, as you get ready to do the release in September. Like, let's either have you back on, or
Yeah.
let's go deeper. Let's go on a hike. You know what I mean?
Let me say one other thing.
Yeah,
So
please.
the impetus for the Soul Adventures was having moved so many times, and I love to whitewater raft. And I was in these places. I'm like, I don't know anybody. I need friends and conscious community and guys who are wanting to like just deepen their level of consciousness and compassion. So we can go have really cool conversations at the campfire or around the fire after we go whitewater rafting. So what I'll start doing probably later, probably around the timing of the book, will be starting to do whitewater rafting men's retreats. And so
Nice.
bringing the hiking, bringing the rock climbing, bringing the whitewater, and also The metaphor. If nothing else, you got to surrender to the water.
And if you ever tried to fight it, you know what happens, right? You
Exactly.
know what
Exactly.
happens. Well,
Yeah.
like keep me posted so that we can share that on our channels,
Yeah.
and as we get ready towards September, let's see how we can maybe get, depending on what coast it's on, what water it's on. Let's
Okay.
let's connect around that. I look forward to learning more about that.
All right, you got it.
Sean, brother, thank you, folks. Listen, Sean and I shared our mask here publicly, but you don't have to do that. Like, you can go to the website millionmask.org and share it anonymously. Maybe once you share it anonymously and see it with your own eyes, maybe you'll find one person in your life. Maybe you'll find a circle of people who you can begin to build a deeper connection with. We want to normalize these conversations. And so, Sean, I think in our next conversation, I would love to learn more about the work you're doing with the militia men in that way. I think it's a huge conversation that sometimes may be hard to have, right? But I think it's probably important in our world. So I look forward to the future opportunities for conversation. And thank you for the work you're doing to help men find more compassion in their own selves. So, folks, we thank you for being a part of the Taking Off the Mask podcast, and we will see you soon. Take care, folks. The Taking Off the Mask podcast is produced by Ryan Louie. Graphics are by Kelly Wong, and a special thanks to the team at Ever Forward, Vanessa Cortez and Choke Allen Alvarez. We'd like to thank everyone who's been a part of the creation of this podcast as we cross the 100th episode milestone and begin the work to the next 100. We hope that everyone who's been a part knows that they're a part of the Taking Off the Mask family. And we look forward to you being a part of it as well. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe, write a 5-star review, and share, as we look forward to continuing to have conversations that matter. Stay tuned for the relaunch of the Million Mask Movement on 11/11/22. That's November 11th of 2022. There's a math problem in there. You can find out more by visiting everforwardclub.org and following us on social media. Take care, and we'll see you soon.